Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
The stock market is up. We're in green territory, so hopefully I won't get as many phone calls today as I did yesterday. Panicked people.
Yes.
But the moral of that story is stay invested because the stock market has always rebounded. Not to say that it always will, but if the past is any indication of the future, we're still in good shape. And we still think we're a ways away from that recession that everybody's talking about. So just keep that in mind and stay invested. As Crystal said, my name is Jeff Nero. I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones Investments, and I've been doing this for just under 2 years. And this is my second career. My first career I spent in apparel and traveled frequently throughout the western United States. And in the mid-40s, I figured, I need to get off the road, get off an airplane, and build a career that's close to home and close to those that matter most. So I got my degree in finance in college at 22 years old. I worked for an investment banking firm. I've always had my hand in finance, so this was kind of a natural job for me. So far, so good. And I think today, for my 10 minutes, our time is best spent going through what I call a solutions-based appointment. These are the types of appointments that I run at my office that you would go through with me when you come to sit down with me. So with that, we'll start with the screen and see if I can get this thing going. We all start our practice, or I do anyways, with 3 important value propositions. The first one is I always want to know what's most important to you. So whatever your goals are, I need to know what that is and what's your why in life and what that money is going to be directed towards. So that's important to me. Secondly, I want you to know that we use an established process to build personalized strategies to help you achieve that goal. It doesn't matter what the goal is, we're going to go through the same process. And lastly, we're going to partner together throughout your life to make sure you're on track. So a lot of financial advisors, once you get signed up with them, you don't see them as often. That's not the case with me. We're going to see each other at least once a year. I see some of my clients once a quarter, but the cadence as to how often we see each other is completely up to you. So with that, we want to know what's most important to you. And we determine your goals. Those 5 subject areas up there contain 100% of my clients' goals. So there's not a subject matter up there that doesn't contain a goal that we talk about. The first one is you're either preparing for retirement, living retirement, paying for education, preparing for the unexpected, or planning your estate or inheritance. So those are all 3 or 5 areas that you can find your goals. Your established process that we will go through. We use an established process to build personalized strategies to help you achieve those goals. So step number 1, we analyze where you're at today. So we take a financial snapshot as to where you currently are. What are you looking like on paper? So this is where we get your assets, your investments, your income, your expenses, and your debt. And we analyze that and kind of see where you are. It's just a financial snapshot. Secondly, where would you like to be? We assess where would you like to be. What are some of those goals that we talked about? So we take those goals, we make needs from those goals, and then we translate those needs into financial pieces that we can track over time and make sure we're making progress towards meeting your goals. Number 3, we want to analyze to see if you can get to where your stated goal is. Sometimes it's a short conversation. Sometimes if you have grandiose goals, there's just no way to get there. And it's kind of like being a financial doctor. And you have to have an honest conversation a lot of times with people and say, hey, I know you want to retire at 42, but the reality of that just isn't a good one. Yeah, you're going to have to move somewhere outside of California to get there. And oftentimes, when we talk about goals at this point, we often bring in CPAs or estate planning attorneys that help us out and gather information too. So depending on what your goal is, we include your other financial professionals. Number 4, so once we assess if you can get there, the question becomes, well, how do I get there? And this is where the magic happens. This is where we put together your portfolio of investments based on your risk tolerance. So if you all open up your folder in front of you, I think to your right there should be a risk tolerance questionnaire. Okay, so that's a 6-question questionnaire that you fill out. You didn't get a folder for me? Sean, can you get her one? Thank you. So that's 6 questions that gives me your tolerance for risk, right? So I'm going to, at this point, at stage 4, when I build your portfolio, I'm going to put together assets or a portfolio of investments that's in alignment with your risk tolerance. So on a scale of 1 to 100, that's the risk spectrum. If you're a 2, I'm not going to say recommend Bitcoin to you. Because that's going to make sure that you lose sleep at night. But what I will do is I will introduce bonds to you, maybe some annuities, some things that allow you to sleep at night if you need that guaranteed income and if you're risk adverse. But that's a key piece for our compliance at Edward Jones, is that we know your risk tolerance. And lastly, number 5, it's not going to number 5, but all that says at step number 5 is, how do we keep on track to meet your goals? Well, we meet on a regular basis. So keep that in mind. Again, the cadence of how often we meet is completely up to you, other than we must meet 1 time a year. How we qualify investments at Edward Jones is a good piece. So there's a whole universe of investments out there. And we have 2 or 3 committees that filters these investments down to a high quality investment. And once it gets to, there it is. Once it gets to this point and filtered down to this point, this is the pool of investments I get to choose from for your portfolios. Then we have a discussion based on your risk tolerance and your goals and your needs. And then we create your portfolio from the assets that have been filtered down to here. So just know that there's a big time process to filtering assets and making sure that we are invested in high quality product for you. The other thing that I think is important about Edward Jones is on the spectrum of wealth advisors, we are definitely the most conservative group of the bunch. So you've got our competitors like UBS and Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley. We are definitely more conservative than they are, for sure. So just something, good point to know about kind of who we are. Let's see, I'm going the wrong way here, I think. Yeah, nope. Okay, so at Edward Jones, just know that it's not just you and I that are working together. We've got you surrounded by an entire team. So it's you, it's myself, it's my branch office administrator, Yolandra, it's your CPA or your estate planning attorney, your professional finance people. And lastly, we've got 2 locations at Edward Jones we call headquarters. One's in St. Louis and one's in Tempe, Arizona. And they both house about 15,000 people. So you've got about 30,000 people working for you to make sure that we're doing the right thing by you at all times.
So maybe the housing, in case things went bad, you go to the house.
Well, we do that too.
Okay, good.
I gotta throw my hands in the air and let them handle it.
Buy that bracelet.
So yeah.
They didn't ask that question.
So we started with the 3 value propositions, and it's just appropriate that we end with them. This is the piece that drives my practice, and it's I want to understand what's important to you. We're going to use an established process. Doesn't matter what your goal is, we're going to use that same process to build personalized strategies to help you achieve your goals. And lastly, we're going to partner with you throughout your life to make sure you're on track. So that essentially is the solutions-based presentation that I give most clients. It's either appointment 1 or appointment 2. So just so you know a little bit about who we are and how we operate and what's important to us. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So, you know, all this yo-yoing back and forth in the stock market, and I understand, you know, the cornerstone is to be in like an index fund to kind of like, you know, balance that out. Do you ever have stock recommendations, or are those things that the individual brings to you and then you help them vet them, or?
Kind of both. You know, it works both ways. I have clients that are really involved in the market and they want to bring me their picks, and sometimes that can be, their picks don't always align with my picks. So, you know, it just depends on who you are and what's important to you. You know, some guys spend 8 hours a day online trying to figure this stuff out. When I wish they wouldn't. I wish they would just let that, you know, we've got those 30,000 people that are constantly vetting investments and stocks, and then it gets to a point that I choose from. But yeah, it just depends.
So there is a pool of, you know, like categorized stocks that have been through your process of vetting.
There is. So we've got what we call an Edward Jones stock buy list. So it's everything that we recommend, and there's hundreds of companies on this buy list.
Okay.
That for various, and there's stories behind each one of these companies, why they're on the buy list.
Right.
So we kind of vet through, that's kind of my starting point. But sometimes somebody will bring me a company that nobody's ever heard of, and it's going to go from 3 cents to $3,000 in 2 months
Right.
once it gets past FDA approval. And you got to look at that. But at the end of the day, it's not something that we're going to put in a portfolio or feel good about putting in a portfolio.
Right.
That's I always tell my clients, that's what you do with your Las Vegas money.
Yeah,
But for your long-term serious money that you need to live on in retirement someday or currently, or plan to pass to your legacy, I'm the advisor for you, because we're going to do the right thing, and we're not going to step up to the plate and try to swing for home runs every time. We're going to hit singles and doubles and triples and singles and doubles and triples and make sure we're doing the right thing and rebalance along the way. So as your portfolio from time to time gets out of whack, either too aggressive or too conservative based on your risk tolerance, then we're going to rebalance. We're going to sell, we're going to buy, we're going to make the appropriate action to make sure you're within your risk tolerance.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads to the next question, which is about overseas stuff. And I see there is mentions here in various levels.
Yeah.
They almost all contain some reference to international stocks. And so is that something you bring to the person? Like, hey, I think we should rebalance into international, or they bring it to you and say?
It's a good question. So what we try to do, we try to achieve a diversified portfolio that's going to weather all market cycles.
Right.
So, there's international, there's large cap, there's small cap, there's growth, there's emerging markets, there's bonds, there's stocks, there's mutual funds. We try to stay as diversified as we can, and international is always a part of our I think in most cases, a part of the portfolios that we build. So it's important to have some international exposure, because as one asset class goes down and gets hit hard, there are other asset classes that will counterbalance that and keep you afloat.
Okay.
Right? That's why we don't invest everything in the index fund that you were talking about.
Right.
We think having equities is important, but we also think having bonds is equally as important because they counterbalance equities. So for instance, in 2009, 2008, the S&P was down 57%. But we added bonds to all of our portfolios, so nobody experienced the full downside of that 57%. The bonds kept you afloat depending on how many bonds you had. If you had a 50-50 portfolio, you would have experienced only 28% of that, 57% downside, because you had bonds. Again, bonds are the counterbalance to stocks.
Right.
Stocks go up, bonds go down, and vice versa.
And then my last question is, what's the distinction between emerging markets and international investments?
Emerging markets is a little bit more aggressive play. Emerging markets are more aggressive. International markets can be companies that are housed here but do business internationally. Emerging markets are typically companies that have headquarters overseas.
Okay.
It's a little bit more aggressive asset class.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Hey, what do you think of Pacific Gas and Electric, right? It's down on one knee right now.
I don't know that story. I just know it's been a dog for a long time. Energy has been a tough category, but again, energy is an asset class that's necessary to invest in to be properly diversified, even though it's been down for a long time. It's a consistent piece of everybody's portfolio that you need to invest in. But PG&E, I'm not sure exactly what their struggles are. I know they've had a couple major gas issues, pipeline outages, and wasn't it in Lancaster?
Yeah, they also suffered losses in the Northern California fire.
Yeah.
Paradise.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, kind of the same story, PG&E and Boeing, companies go through these good times and bad times. So we're not interested in investing against a particular cycle. If the market is driven, we're interested in investing in a company. So we look at the company, even if the asset class is down, say oil, we know that Chevron's a great company for a lot of reasons. So we're going to, no matter what, invest in Chevron. Regardless of what happens at Boeing, they had a mishap with their 737, but we know Boeing is an amazing company with amazing leaders and is changing the world. So we still believe in the Boeing brand, and we think it's on sale. So, a good point, a good thought about when the market goes down, just consider it that it's like going to Walmart and something's on sale. Well, Boeing's on sale. Apple's on sale. We just had an 800-point down day yesterday, so everything across the board is on sale. So rather than panic, I believe, my personal philosophy, it's a good time to buy. You buy when the market goes down. If it goes down lower, even better, then buy some more tomorrow, etc. All the way to the bottom. And had people done that in 2008, rather than getting out and locking in your losses, they would have been in much better shape because, as we said, the market bounced back in the last 10 years. It's been this rocket ride to the top. You know, it's created more wealth in the last 10 years since the recession than any other point in the market's history. But people that got out at the bottom of the market, that was the worst move to make. So stay convicted, stay invested, employ an advisor, preferably me, to talk you off the ledge when you get there. Because if your portfolio goes from $1 million down to $500,000 and you're 65 when that happens, that's a scary time to not panic. Because you want to retire and your portfolio went from $1 million to $500,000, those are real conversations that we need to have. And I need to, and you're panicked because you're trying to retire and your family needs the money and the market just took a major hit. Well, you know, give me a call. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss about what we've talked about in the past when things were calm, cool, and collected, and revisit those same conversations. But we try to take the emotion out of it. So that's the important thing. There's a lot of science to the market and the numbers. You got to get away from that emotion. And that's what I do with a lot of my clients is when we have 800-point down days, I get a lot of phone calls. And a lot of those conversations are just calming phone calls. Just try to calm them and remind them of what they're doing and what our strategy is and what we talked about 3 months ago when the market was at 27.4 and it was a better conversation. Yes?
So how frequently do you recommend that people rebalance?
Well, we've got a system at Edward Jones that if an asset class moves more than 5%, it'll fall outside of your criteria and it'll be rebalanced. I'll get a call from my home office saying, Don's portfolio is out of balance, his asset class moved. You know, consider these changes to get Don back into balance. So I'll call you at that point and say, Don, we're out of balance, we need to make some trades to get you back into balance. This is what I'm looking to do. And you either agree with that or disagree, and then we talk through that. Then we've got another portfolio type that we give the investment decisions to the folks at Edward Jones, and they will automatically rebalance for you. So the one type we have, you and I are rebalancing. The other account type we have is Edward Jones is combing through your portfolio once a week, red flagging it if it's out of balance 1 week, and then if it comes back the second week to look at it, if it's still out of balance, then it'll automatically rebalance for you.
Okay,
Yes?
Two things. Is it possible for us to recommend you to a person who's out of state?
Of course, you bet. Yep.
Okay. Then my final one is, you know, investing is like super personal, and you know, people like don't like to make big wild moves. You know, how can we help refer people to you? What kind of situations or conversations should we be looking for to help you? To help bring you leads?
Well, I think especially now people are concerned with the volatility in the market and the looming recession that everybody's talking about. So for me, the big thing is people want to weatherproof their portfolio. They want to, there's turbulent waters ahead. We don't know this for sure. I mean, I never claim to prognosticate. I just do my job and let the other guys on TV do that and scare everybody. But yeah, so people that want to weatherproof their portfolio, it's always a good idea, even if you've been with a guy for 35 years, to come in and get a second set of eyes on your portfolio, and I'll discuss my strategy. You know, if this was my $1 million or $500,000, here's what I would do and here's why I would do it. Well, you know, I understand you've been with your guy at Nero for 40 years, and he was your dad's guy, and he was your dad's guy, but here's a second opinion. That can't hurt. I'd love to do it for you. He's 139.
Yeah.
Older than Moses. But I'd love to do that with you. Yep.
What's the difference between mutual funds and ETFs?
Very similar product. Mutual funds are actively traded. So you've got a fund manager or 10 that are watching these funds. So a mutual fund, say, has got 200 stocks in it. So it's a diversified basket of stocks. And then you've got 10 to 15 guys that are responsible for managing their share of that mutual fund. And they get paid based on say they're getting 20 stocks, on how those 20 stocks do. So you've got a guy or a gal all day long that's looking at those 20 stocks, making the right decisions all the time. If something falls out of favor, he yanks that stock in and puts another stock in. So that's a mutual fund because it's actively managed. An ETF typically tracks an index, so it's not actively managed. So I think one of the better known ETFs as QQQ, or a NASDAQ mutual fund. So it follows the action of the NASDAQ. Good thing about an ETF, they're a little bit less expensive than a mutual fund. The bad thing about an ETF is the NASDAQ falls 20%, that ETF is also falling 20%. So it mirrors the index that it's attached to, okay? Whereas a mutual fund, the guy is going to see down stocks and go, wait a minute, I can't have all these down stocks. So they're yanking and pulling and replacing and working on that mutual fund all day long. That's what they do.